Going back into the kind of origin of how I started in heavy metal music and that sort of thing, and I don't want to sort of keep this a bit shorter to the first time I started to buy heavier albums, because the general run of heavy metal in the 80s when coming into it is like now in the mainstream, what was considered more commercial were basically just bands that had singers, or bands that were played rock, or like a Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, Kiss, Whitesnake, Aerosmith, all that sort of thing. I mean, these are, to me, they're classic rock bands. But by the end of the 80s, they did a lot of bands like that did go through this sort of like very commercial kind of polished production sort of thing, where they did ballads and all that sort of thing, where all their classic material was just like raw hard rock in the 70s, that sort of thing. And in the 80s, a lot of the bands that were still around from that point were kind of like meld into the sort of like everyone calls it hair metal now, and it was just rock. It just the hard rock thing, and a lot of people called it glam in them days, depending on which bands and what have you, and who wore the most makeup out of the Motley Crue kind of Motley Crue and Poison kind of world. Um, and of that world, I like bands like Dokken, Rat, Wasp. Wasp, I would say, are more of a heavy metal band. And of course, this is where you get into your, before I knew anything about the underground scene, the extreme scene, or the thrash scene, or any of that kind of thing. It's like I would hear bands like Anthrax, or I'd heard of bands like Anthrax, and I'd hear a term called thrash metal. I didn't know what it was. So Anthrax, I would hear their song being their latest single, which was like late 80s. They had a song called Antisocial. I didn't know it wasn't one of theirs. I didn't know it was a cover by a band called Trust. So I thought, because I'd already heard it, because like I say, I'd already heard like Maiden Priest, Whitesnake, Def Leppard, Wasp, Kiss, and guitar heroes like Yngwie Malmsteen. That was another one. Um, and that was where my rock star dreams, original ones, had sort of like formed out of the kind of like the run of the mill heavy metal, what was considered heavy metal at that point. And Anthrax were names like Anthrax and Metallica were already on there. And anyway, so cut a long story short, now I'd hear a lot of bad things said about Anthrax. A lot of people would take the piss out of him, they didn't take him very seriously, that sort of thing. And I didn't realise what a strong fan base they really had. And particularly, it's like in the thrash metal scene. Now, you do get your love, and Anthrax still get love and hate in equal measures to this day. And I think so do a lot of different other bands in their own kind of way. It's like you either love them or you hate them. I think that is the beauty of heavy metal music right across the board. Any sort of heavy music, you either love it or you hate it, depending on what bands and what have you. And I'm not going to go too in depth about that kind of thing, because I want to stick to the fun aspects of being a kid getting into heavy metal. So anyway, so Anthrax, I thought they sounded pretty awesome, that Antisocial song, and then I saw the advert for their for the single. It was in Kerrang, I think it was, or Metal Hammer, or one of those magazines. And I would see what the B-side was, because this was the 80s and there was no internet back then. So you had to find out what other material bands had. So they had, on a single, back of a single, you had the B-side. Now, I wish I had I've got several singles down there. I'll maybe do it for another video. So you looked on the B side and you found out what other material they had out there, and sometimes it would sound like a much better song because it was less commercial, just something extra for the band to sort of sell to the wide demographic of audience out there that they were selling it to, that the record company were promoting it to, all that sort of thing. So there was a song called, so on the back of this Antisocial 7-inch vinyl single sleeve was a song called Make Me Laugh. So anyway, so So being the little 14-year-old kid that I was, or 13 I think I still was, and I was thumbing through all of the records and that sort of thing, and I would pick out Anthrax's State of Euphoria, and I've got to avoid the light glare there. And here it is. You know, and I mean, that is a pretty damn good cartoon picture there with the Knot Man, all 5 of the guys. The inner sleeve, all the lyrics, and you know, I'll be looking for things like that whenever I picked up a record sleeve or a cassette or whatever. Now, older cassettes just used to have a plain white inlay inside. I'm just putting this back together a minute. So they'd have a plain white inlay inside, and there'd be nothing in there just apart from just the song titles. But towards the mid-80s, and they started doing the more colour sort of layout, you know, with the photographs on there and all the lyrics and stuff like that. So, and of course, where a lot of the new cassettes, because it was all cassette. I've got a cassette copy of this one still. You know, I still keep hold of it, even though I don't play it hardly anymore. But so anyway, so I took this record sleeve up to the counter in this particular shop, and they seemed like pretty damn cool dudes, sort of thing. They probably weren't necessarily metalheads. I think they were aware of it. They were like kids in their teens or whatever, like, you know, and they were quite happy to play whatever I took up to the counter for them to play, you know. And there were several records that I did that with. And some of them were pretty damn extreme anyway. And this particular record shop, it used to have speakers out the front, because it was quite a long shop. The record section was out the back, so I'd go and get this. I got that from there. But like I said, out the front, you're walking past the shop, you got speakers. You know, whatever music was playing in the record store department out the back there, it would be out there. So if I took some metal up there and playing it, people walking past, they would be getting a fucking education. They'd be getting an education of metal, you know, or hardcore punk or extreme whatever I took up there, they'd play it, you know. So, and I was an absolute pain in the ass, you know, when it came to record shops. And can you play this? Can you play this? You know, all the time I was like that, you know. But anyway, so as soon as the opening notes to this album, or to the song "Make Me Laugh" came on, you know, it's like after the intro section of the song played through and that, which I thought sounded pretty damn awesome. I thought, wow, this is getting to be a good song. And then as soon as the first riff comes in on the main hook, oh fuck, you know, whoa. You know, the fast drumming and that sort of thing, and Charlie Benanti, it was just like, and that rhythm guitar sound is like my dreams of wanting to be a rock star, wanting to be Yngwie Malmsteen II, or Joe Satriani III, or Steve Vai IV, or whatever typical rock star dreams about being the next best lead guitarist. All of that went right out of the window as soon as I heard this and other bands to follow. It was right out the fucking window. It really was. And anyway, when I was talking about when you discover because it was either singles or greatest hits albums of one, you know, of the bigger bands getting into rock before thrash. And this is where you'd open, and like I say, you'd find out what other stuff, you know, on a single you'd find the B-side. If it's a greatest hits album, you'd probably find other back catalogue albums, and you find out what other stuff's going on. It's like, wow. And you get to know a bit more about a band and their stuff they had. But anyway, getting to know more about the thrash thing, it's like I'd finally read this magazine called Metal Forces, which is more of the underground sort of thing. It had all of the genres of metal, you know, because there weren't so many back then. It was just like, it was rock, heavy metal, or thrash. You know, it was all called heavy metal, of course, as the umbrella term, which I quite like, you know. Heavy music, rock, you know, heavy, whatever, like. and it still covered all of that, but it covered a lot more of the lesser known bands, what bands were upcoming, that sort of thing, you know, sort of new bands that nobody's heard of yet, and they treat them with a bit more of a kind of respect, in a way, rather than. And I'm not going to get too much into the sort of differences of what the journalists were like with mainstream magazines and underground, as opposed to underground magazines or lesser known or whatever. It doesn't matter. Not for this video right now. But I want to talk about a certain album that I found advertised in this Metal Forces magazine. 1989 it was, I remember now, because that was quite a big year for me, because that was the first year where I really became a fully fledged metalhead. As fully fledged for a 13, 14-year-old kid. And I find this album, the compilation Speed Kill series, was already up and running, because later I'd also find out about that. This is like volume 4. And they called this particular compilation Speed Kills But Who's Dying. And it's got wonderful graphics on, you know, pictures on there of all the bands that are on there, like Nuclear Assault, Hex, Exodus, Forbidden, Possessed, Dark Angel, Acid Rain, Death. That is Corthon from Bathory here, and the interesting thing about thrash metal scenes and that sort of thing, back at what was considered thrash was the most popular thing, but it also introduced you to other extreme styles of music. So death metal was the next upcoming thing. Black metal was pretty much there in bits and pieces and what have you. And again, that'll be another discussion for another video, I think. But this is where I'd hear the opening riffs to Exodus, Parasite, that sort of modal kind of riff, and then straight into the heavy power chords, and then the fast that kind of thing. It's off, and I think, yeah, definitely with this album. Inside the gatefold here, if I just open this out, and that was a great thing about vinyl, is like, you'd find all of the other, bands that were about, you'd find their albums. It's like, if I thought, now, pretty much all of the songs on this album, I thought were pretty damn awesome. Some more than others, of course. You know, it's natural. And so I would want to find out what album was this off, what band are they who's playing it, and that sort of thing. You know, and sort of getting new to it all. And it was inside the inner sleeve like that is what you'd find. And that sort of thing. Like, now I think my favourite band's on this particular one, Exodus, no doubt. There are a couple of obscure bands on here. I just hear about Reanimator. They're a British band. Apocalypse, I think they're a British band as well. I think they only had one album out. I don't know much about them. Acid Rain, Death. That was my introduction to death metal kind of thing. Holy Terror, Bathory, introduction to the sort of Scandinavian, they were a black metal band, of course. Nuclear Assault, Agony, Hex, another Exodus song playing an AC/DC song, Forbidden, awesome band, you know, Possessed, Dark Angel, how fast was that? That was, you know, that was just aggressive. Even when I learned more about that band, even when they played slower songs, it was like, wow, that was like very gritty, in your face, you know, yeah. And a final Acid Rain song. So, Speed Kills, Volume 4, Speed Kills But Who's Dying, Horns Up,